my channel, and it is on topic for October. So, you are going to hear an alien story and a ghost story. So, just for some context, back in 2016 or 2017, I started a podcast called Ghost Life Whatever. The podcast where you could talk about ghosts, could talk about life, whatever. But it turns out I am not social enough to reach out to people and ask them to tell me their stories. So it didn't last long, but this story that you are about to hear was my favorite thing that came from it. I love this story. So I hope you enjoy, and as I said, it's not ASMR, but he does speak in a very consistent volume and tone, so, you know, it's enjoyable, and, yeah, it's spooky, it's spooky, it's spooky, and, you know, it was a podcast, so there's no video for it, so it might just be a black screen that you're looking at. Who knows? We'll see what I decide to do. Anyway, here we go.
So this is a lot of my dad's story, but then I come into the story. Or rather, I didn't know he had this story until I came into the story, and then I learned more about it, if that makes any sense. I lived in an apartment in Bellflower, California. It was me and my dad. Growing up, it was just me and my dad. My mom and him separated. So I was with my dad a lot, and he also switched jobs a lot. So we were moving around in different places. But this was an apartment in Bellflower. It was pretty close to my school, my elementary school. And I would typically walk to school. But before I go to school, 7 a.m. DuckTales was on. And I just loved watching DuckTales before school. Although the sucky part is I could never watch the last 5 minutes of it because I'd be late for school. Just kind of sucks. So what happened is I wake up in the morning and I'm going out to do my routine, to watch some DuckTales, and I didn't have a TV in my room. And but what I walk into is just absolutely just not what I expect. So there's a table just in the living room, and my dad is laid upon it, and there are several extraterrestrial beings standing around him, and they all are kind of hovering over him. There's a few on the side, and then there's one really tall one who's at the head of the table over his head. Now they all look pretty similar, kind of the what you see with the big eyes, the little face, it starts big and gets smaller as you go to the chin, kind of that. And they were wearing I guess surgical outfits, medical outfits, maybe not surgical, but there was something on them. They weren't naked. And they weren't the only ones. There were a couple others kind of in the background, in the dark, because it was dark, but light enough I could see. And they looked different. They looked like a totally different species of alien. Now, I am freaked out. I am going to get some cereal and watch DuckTales, and there's my dad laying on this table, and there's aliens, and oh my gosh. But my dad, very calmly, because they all look towards me. Everyone's looking at me, and I'm panicked. And my dad tells me that it's okay, that he knows them, and I should just go back to bed. And so I go back to bed. So I wake up from going back to bed, and I go out, and here's the thing. It's now time to wake up and go watch DuckTales. So I'm thinking, crazy dream, but super realistic dream. My dad now has already left for work because he's always left before me. So that was another shocker. He would have even been there in the first place, let alone the table and so forth. So later that night, I tell my dad, I was like, I had this crazy dream that I got up, went to the living room, and you were laying on this table, and I just, as I start to describe it, not even really get into any detail, but just start to, my dad just goes completely pale, like just white. And he begins to describe what was happening. And he and I both witnessed the same thing. And he tells me, opens up in confidence. He said, they were here last night. But don't worry. He didn't really remember me coming out or anything like that. But he proceeds to tell me the story that when he was a kid, when he was a young child, down in LA, there was an epidemic going across and kids were just dying. Like there's no cure. And he was in the hospital for a lot of his life, young life. And everyone who came into the hospital, they'd come and all these kids would die. And very, very, very few kids ever actually survived. But my dad did. And he didn't tell anybody at the time, but he knows why he was saved. He remembers that there was this alien who came and visited him. First one was a short little guy who he described it kind of looked like a shark face. Kind of had an elongated bit of his face and kind of that shark shark look. I've never seen this alien. I couldn't describe it again. This is my dad's story that I come into later. And he remembers that this alien visited him a couple of times in the middle of the night when everyone else was asleep and would perform some tests on him, things he didn't really understand that was happening. And then after, a few months, he'd seen this guy a couple of times. He remembers this really tall alien, one that has the big eyes, the big head, slimmers down to his chin, very tall and skinny. And this, he felt and was a doctor, but not of this earth, and performed some sort of test on him, did something to him, and my dad got better, and he was ultimately released, and one of the few children to ever survive. Over the years, this tall alien doctor and companions would visit my dad in the middle of the night to, he assumes, check up on him, follow up on what they did to save him or see how he's progressing. And as he grew older, it was less and less frequent. So it was more frequent, it was happening fairly often when he was a kid, and then it would go years and years and years. And that night, he says they came to him. It's all very foggy. It's not like super clear memories. That they had come to check up on him, and it was the first time since I had been born that they had come. And I was probably, 9-ish. And that night that morning came out to watch DuckTales. There was my dad on the table, and he and I could mutually describe exactly how everyone looked that night without ever even telling each other the story beforehand. So it was very, very mind-blowing. As far as I've gathered from him, and even that brief moment I witnessed it, they're just coming to check up on him. They're running some diagnostic tests. I don't know exactly what they're doing. But there's no communication. There was never any explanation or anything like that. The closest he said it ever seemed like somebody was communicating was that first alien who visited him, the shark-faced short one. It wasn't a direct communication, but my dad told me it kind of felt like he was trying to communicate without using words. I don't know, kind of getting my dad used to the idea of an alien, perhaps, before that tall doctor one came in. And I shouldn't say like all the kids in town were dying of it. What I mean is the kids who got it were dying. If I imply that like the whole town, like it was a weird only adults lived scenario, that's not what I meant. I just meant if the kids got it, you weren't really looking to survive. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember even my grandpa and grandma, his parents, you know, always talking about just how lucky they were that my dad was one of the only kids to survive that they knew of who had it. Gosh, it really does sound like I'm saying all the kids are dying. Just the kids that got it were dying. My dad actually had this picture. I got lost in one of the moves. Like I said, we moved a lot. But it was actually when he was younger, and he went motorcycling across the United States. And he took this picture of the car. There was a car and a cemetery, a car next to a cemetery. And he took a picture, and only after it was developed, it looked like there was some ghosts in the car. But in one of the seats, it also looked like one of the aliens. But like he was in the back seat, so you could only kind of see part of his head. I don't know. It was a pretty cool photo. I wasn't supposed to show anybody. I showed it to a couple friends, though, anyways. There was a guy who looks a lot like a ghost. The woman ghost in it kind of looked like Miss Piggy a little bit. I don't know. It was kind of weird. But my ghost story... So I've been able to sense, I feel like, some ghosts here and there, pretty mildly. The house I just moved from, I feel like there was the ghost of the mom of the owner who died in the house. Very benign presence. My fiance wouldn't even go downstairs. She hated going downstairs. That's where the washer and dryer was. So eventually, you know, we couldn't avoid it completely. I didn't really mind. But we didn't really tell too many people. It's just because it was, I don't know. My nephew came and lived with me for a little bit. And he noticed it because he actually lived in the basement. That's where we put him up. That he'd feel like doors and stuff would move on their own. And of course, it's an old house. And I remember my dad visited, and he was sitting in the living room, and we hadn't told him anything about it. And then he asked me if I'd ever seen anything in the house, and then I told him. He's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just saw something like go past the door, like from down the hallway, just like an image of something." But this story was when this was really intense. This was not a benign ghost. This was a get the hell out of my house demonic ghost, and it was terrifying. I was young, as I mentioned. I lived with my dad, and I would only see my mom 1 week in a month, but over the summer I did have to spend an entire month with her. It's just part of the divorced kid who gets blah. My mom and I never really got along growing up. But this was, again, I was pretty young. I was this summer. My sister, I have a sister, by the way. So my sister is in this as well. It was summertime, and I was going to have to spend some time with my mom. And she was with husband number, I don't know, 3, 4, 5. I've kind of lost track. But they were moving into this house. I was there, so I was going to be staying with them and help them move. And we got to this house. This is where we were moving in. And it didn't look like much. Again, this is a very suburban neighborhood. It was a 1-story, I think 3-bedroom house. It was kind of narrow but long. And we pulled up. The grass was all overgrown. It was gated. So you pull up in the driveway. The driveway's on the left. And there's a gated front yard right to the right with like an opening door. And you can go further up the driveway into a garage. But the house then lays to the right of this long driveway. And I hate being there. It's summer. It's hot. I'm with my mom. I don't get along with her. And I damn it, I gotta move all this stuff too. And we came out between one of the, trips of moving stuff in, and there was these 2 dogs that had just shown up. They were stray dogs. There were no tags on them, nothing like that. There was this little mutt that was short, but had like long, like unkempt hair, and then there was this little black kind of, I guess you call it it was like a min pin Chihuahua mixture. It was a small little thing, very short hair. These dogs, they wouldn't leave. Like, they just hung out at the house. While we were doing that, they just kept watching us and just kept watching us. And we decided, well, we'll bring them in, we'll take care of them, we'll put up, some signs or something like that. And the little scroungy little one, I kind of like took over as my dog. My sister took over kind of the other one, and those dogs kind of bonded with us as such. The weird feeling started, within the first week of being there. Kind of how the house was set up, and where most of the weird feelings started was right when you walk in the front door. You walk in the front door, there is a small little, I guess you could be a living room, but pretty small. There's a wall just straight ahead, and then in the left corner is where you get to the kitchen. The kitchen's right there, and the right, there's a door to a hallway where all the bedrooms were attached. That front little living room area, you didn't really feel comfortable there. And it feels like, well, it's a small little room. Maybe it's a little claustrophobic, just the way it's set up or whatnot. And I remember that we never set anything up there. We didn't put any furniture there at all. Beyond the kitchen was a bigger area, which we kind of made the living room. That's where we had the couch and the TV. And then from there, in that room, there was also a sliding glass door to the backyard, which also then curved around to the garage and the driveway. And then to the right, there was the hallway of bedrooms, and then there was a little walkway. But we never set up anything in that front room. I remember feeling like it just didn't feel good to be in that room. Like I said, maybe it just felt claustrophobic at first. But that's when we started seeing things. Never seeing things directly, but we would see things in the peripheral of our vision. And when we saw it, it was almost always in the hallway going through the bedrooms or in the kitchen, and it would be at the peripheral image of where that front room was. And this wasn't a weird, just apparition or anything like that. It looked like a full shadow silhouette of a person. And that person, if you went to look at him, you wouldn't see it, but you'd see it in the corner, and that person, it was like they were just staring you down, and just evil and hatred just coming right at you. As if you had a tall man standing to your side, but rather than being a man, it was just blackness. So there was a void in the shape of that man. It was definitely a man. He was definitely tall, and he was definitely staring at you whenever you were near that room. And the dogs would often bark at that room, and they would stay with us, one with my sister, one with me. There was one night, my sister and I and the parent, my mom and stepdad were gone, and we were in the dining room. We were back in the room where we have the TV. And I remember going into the kitchen to get something, and I saw the peripheral again. At this point, it's kind of one of those things that it's just like it bothers you. You don't want to go to the kitchen. You don't want to go to the hallway down to the bedroom. My sister, her bedroom, had to pass that door into that little front room. So absolute worst for her, I'm sure. Mine, I didn't have to pass that. And I just remember feeling that even more intense feeling from this. It was, you could see it, and it was a person standing there, and it was all just dark and you felt it. You felt it. It made you feel bad. You weren't allowed to be there. You didn't belong there. It was very odd. Nothing I've ever felt like before or since. But yeah, the worst of it was the kitchen, because you can't live in a house and avoid the kitchen. And the fridge was right next to and it wasn't a door. It was just a doorway. So you couldn't even close the door. Perhaps if we put a door there, maybe it would have felt a lot better. But he'd bend down to go into the fridge, and the fridge door is opening like towards that hole of the doorway. And you go bend to get something in the fridge, and you just feel like somebody's just standing over you. Like, I remember, like, kind of not sidestepping or walking backwards, but, like, kind of keeping my head facing towards the dining room a little bit more. Try to keep my back to it. Because if you got too much in your peripheral, you would just feel this. I would say you always felt it. You didn't always see the man, like right there in the doorway. But you always felt there was something coming from there. But a lot, you would see that shadow man just standing there. And in the living room that night, out on the back porch, outside that sliding glass door, there was I remember a weight set. It was there when we got there. There was a lot of things there when we got there, including this weight set. And I came and I talked to my sister about just this feeling, like I was telling her, it's so bad tonight. Like, it's so much worse than it usually is. And right when we were talking about it, this dumbbell that was like sitting up just like knocked forward and rolled right towards the window. I mean, no damage or anything. It wasn't thrown through the window. It's just, I don't understand how that could have happened. My sister tells me that to go into her room. She needed to show me something in her room. And I never went into her room because you had to pass that front room. We all, whenever we needed to leave the house, we go through the sliding door and go around either the pathway on the right or by the garage on the left, because it just didn't want to go through that room anymore. So she takes me to the room, and I got my dog following me. She got her dog following her, and she shows me that her room had all this like wallpaper up, this like floral wallpaper. And she shows me, she peels it off right by the door, shows me what's behind some of the wallpaper. And there is just carvings of just symbols and just weird shit. And that's just from one little piece. We didn't like take off the wallpaper from the whole place. The whole room was covered in wallpaper. As a kid, I just assumed the whole place was just covered in all these carvings and etchings. Maybe they weren't, maybe it was in this one spot. But it was just weird symbols, like somebody just took a knife and was just carving weird things in it. And her room being so close, as we were looking at it, I just remember feeling just absolutely like, I can't stay here. Like, I don't care if my month's not up. Like, I'm going home to my dad. I was convinced that if we stayed there any longer, the wall, it would just peel off itself and just expose this great, artwork of just horrific, like, I don't know, Satan-like symbols. But we didn't peel it off. I think we were a little too scared to do that. That was enough. That little bit was like, this is not good. I can't stay here. And my sister has nowhere to go, though, and my sister and I talk a lot. My mom and this husband, they were off drinking and doing drugs a lot. But they also, when we weren't around, had been experiencing issues with this house as well. And we ended up moving, all of us. We just got all our stuff and just left. When we were leaving and packing, the dogs left, and we never saw the dogs again. We'd never put them on leashes or collars or anything because they just would follow us around, one by my sister, one by me. They were with us at all times. They came when we moved in. They disappeared when we moved out. And I feel like they were there to protect us, me and my sister being kids. Like, maybe something happened there to kids in the house. And somehow these animals could sense that. I'm not really sure where they came from, where they went. And we got out of that house. My sister and I talked about it here and there over the years, just kind of this weird memory we had because we were there and out so quick. My mom, who I stopped talking with for a very long time, and in just this last year, I brought up this house because I had just told the story for the first time to my fiance. Freaked her out. And I'd never really gone back and asked my mom about her thoughts on this house. And she just didn't remember. She's like, I don't remember that at all. And I said, well, Mom, you were doing a lot of drugs back then, and maybe you don't remember. But I'm like, my sister, Delia and I, we remember. She calls me back in the middle of the night, later that night. And she's just like, I remember. Like it all, like she's like, maybe it was the drugs, maybe it was the fear, but I completely blocked all that house out of me. But you're right. That was a horribly, horribly demonically haunted house that we couldn't live in for more than a few weeks because there was a presence there that did not want you there and made sure you felt it from the inside. It was a very, very frightening few weeks.